Imagine standing on a mountaintop, holding a piece of pottery left behind 1,000 years ago. Who lived here, high above the desert floor? What kind of people built villages in these cliffs and survived in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth? Today, we begin the journey to uncover their story. And what we find may change how you see the Arizona desert forever. I'm Will, and this is Secrets of the Hohokam. Long before the modern cities and highways, the Hohokam built their lives right here in these mountains, carving out villages on ridges and building stone walls that still stand today. To many, this looks like a barren wilderness, but to the Hohokam, these mountains were home, filled with resources, wild plants, and game. And though much of their story is still a mystery, what they left behind shows us that they didn't just survive here, they thrived. You've probably heard of the Hohokam as canal builders of the Salt and Gila rivers. And while that's true, not all Hohokam lived in these river valleys. Some of the most fascinating communities lived right up here in the Highlands, in small, fortified villages tucked away in the hills. By around 450 AD, we see the first signs of what we call Hohokam culture. Villages along the rivers like the Salt, small communities of just a few families, and early canals to water their fields. But life in the desert was never easy. And as conditions changed, many of these early farmers moved higher into the mountains, seeking safety, resources, and a new way of life. These pottery pieces, left behind for centuries, are some of our best clues to understanding who they were. The designs, the shapes, the clay itself, they tell a story of survival, art, and identity. But how did they make these? And what can we learn from trying to recreate them today? That's what we'll explore next, as we take a closer look at Hohokam pottery, with a little help from my friend, Redpaw, and the rest of the crew. Here at Willow's Southwest Studio, this is where we take what the Hohokam left behind and try to understand how they lived, not just by looking, but by making. Up in the mountains, the Hohokam made plainware, practical pots for cooking, carrying water, and storage. But in the larger villages down in the river valleys, they also crafted beautiful decorated pottery, like red on buff, painted with hematite. In this series, we're going to explore both kinds, because whether plain or painted, these pots were essential to daily life, and figuring out how to make them and fire them is a challenge in itself. Luckily, I've got help. Our primitive pottery expert, Redpaw, has been studying these techniques for a while now.
Yeah. Oh, Will, these plainware pots might not look like much, but they were the backbones of life in the mountains. They had to survive heat, water, daily use, and open fire cooking. If we're going to fire them like the Hohokam, we need to get it right. One wrong move and they'll crack or explode.
Oh boy, and trust me, I've broken a few already. But we'll keep trying until we get it right. And in our next episode, we're starting big, taking some decorative Hohokam-inspired pottery, including a flower plate and a miniature Gila jar. So, now that you've seen what we're working on, let me introduce you to the rest of the crew here at Willow's Southwest Studio. The team that helps bring ancient pottery back to life. And make sure I don't get too far off track. First up is Redpaw, our primitive pottery expert. If there's anyone who knows what kind of wood to use for firing and what it takes to get pottery through a fire without breaking it, it's him.
You use the wrong wood, Will, and you're not just gonna ruin a pot. You'll have a carbon nightmare on your hands to show for it.
Then, of course, there's Cibola, another one of our pottery experts. He loves to be out in the field, searching for clues and figuring out how these pots were really made. And then there's Saladia. Saladia is our Salado expert. If there's a connection between Salado and Hohokam pottery, she's the one digging into those mysteries. To really understand how the Hohokam lived, you just can't study the pottery. You've got to come out here, where they built their villages and carved their lives into the land. The Hohokam didn't live in large cities like the lowland villages. Instead, they built small settlements in places like this, high above the valleys, where they had access to natural resources and defensive positions. Right here, you can see what's left of a structure. Maybe part of a storage pit or even a house foundation. The mountain settlements didn't have platform mounds or ball courts like the lowlands, but they left behind some clues. And sometimes, if you're lucky, this is what we're looking for. A piece of plainware pottery. No decorations, no nothing fancy, just functional, everyday pot used for cooking and carrying water. These pots weren't made to be beautiful. They were made to survive. And that's exactly what they did, outlasting their makers, still here, centuries later. It's one thing to study these pots in the studio, but when you're standing here, you start to understand why they were made this way. Everything they did, their tools, their homes, their pottery, was about survival in this rugged land. So when we take our pots to the fire, we're not just putting clay to the test, we're putting ourselves to the test to see if we can learn what the Hohokam knew about this land and how to work with it. This is it. We've shaped the clay, tempered it, and followed the ancient techniques. But the fire decides what survives. There's no backup plan, just open flames, and everything we've learned so far.
You get this wrong, and you're not gonna have pots. Just a big pile of regret and sherds.
Well, Red Paul, I guess that's the learning curve. This is the test, not just of clay, but of understanding, of patience, of process.
That one in the middle, it's making me nervous.
It could all come together, or fall apart. We won't know the outcome of this firing just yet, but it's not the end of the journey. Next time, we raise the stakes. Painted Hohokam pottery, fired the ancient way.
Oh, and you thought this was risky.
This firing was just the beginning. These pots may survive, or may not, but each one teaches us something about the people who once called this land home.
Every fire tells a story. Whether or not you like the ending, that's up to the clay.
Well, we've got more stories to tell. Next time, we fire Hohokam pottery inspired by real designs. Delicate, decorated, and far less forgiving. So subscribe, stick around, and let's see what the fire teaches us next.